on this computer. There we go. Okay, we're recording. So welcome to class. So let me first get the example I mentioned to you last week. So this little guy here is kind of in the style that we're going to be making. He's lost his eyebrow. He doesn't have his little what do you call it? Pupils, little black pupils. But we're going to go and build one of these. And usually this is going to take this is a whole day type of build. I'll just be honest with you. This will probably take you a day to 2 days at the most to make. And the reason is because of cutting all this stupid felt. You can see these little felt pieces. So we're not going to do that today. We're not actually going to coat him. We're just going to do the underbody. So we're going to do the foam and the wire and just build him up and then cut him and whatever else. So let's first talk about the design itself. We're going to go on the internet and I'm going to explore some images for you and kind of demonstrate to you how things are built, all right, and why they're made the way they are. There is a thing with stop motion where in the United States there's kind of an ego. Flavia's asking how my back is. My back was destroyed over the weekend, so I actually didn't get a chance to cut up all this material and get it all together for you. I was on my back from Saturday till yesterday. So I have a judo injury from doing judo, from throwing people. So, and it flares up when I hold my son, which is really odd. But anyway, so thank you, Flavia, for asking. So anyway, there's kind of an ego in stop motion or in animation in general, where one technique tends to be like, this is how you do things. And then somebody else on the other side goes, no, this is how you do things. And I'm going to tell you, it doesn't matter. It's just as long as it works and it works good for you, then it's definitely a valuable technique to know. And the technique I'm going to show you is actually goes back to the Czechoslovakia before it was the Czech Republic, and then also Japanese style. So let me turn on my interwebs here, and let's share my screen real quick. Let's see, Google. Go. Share my screen. All right. Okay, so we are on the internet, on the interwebs, and I am going to move this little thing because it's in my way. You can't even tell what I'm doing here. All right, I am going to search for, and believe it or not, Yuri Tronka. Whoops. Yuri Tronka. All right, and there he is in that images. And I'm going to move this over so I can grab it. There we go. Move back. And then the other one is Kawamoto animator. Maybe it will show up properly. There we go. Kawamoto. I spelled him wrong. Sorry, sir. He is a legend. So okay, let's go into the Google Images and images. Okay, so as you might have remembered in our prior chat or in one of the modules, I kind of attribute Yuri Tronka to being the man for making armatures and basically puppets. Our modern day puppets are actually an offshoot of his designs. People attribute Harryhausen and Willis O'Brien, but in all honesty, Harryhausen didn't make puppets really except for molding and casting and sculpting. He did that. His father actually did most of the machine work until his father passed away. So all that machine work was done by a machinist in reference to Harryhausen. Willis O'Brien, I don't believe he really made his puppets. There's actually another guy that made his puppets for him. Those styles are attributed to this guy, Yuri Tronka, a lot of the time. There is some overlap and whatever, but in the most part, Tronka is our man. He is our hero here because he really utilized ball and socket armatures and wire armatures and really kind of revolutionized the techniques for building puppets. So when we look at his style and look at his build, he builds in a specific way. Now, the animation for the time was amazing. Move my camera here. Animation for the time was amazing. But in all honesty, now it's a little choppy in comparison to like Leica Studios or anybody else, really, even Robot Chicken. It's the animation is really like, I call it pose to pose animation, where it's like boop, 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 you know, where it's moving from side to side, and they're really just exaggerated movements, and they freeze and then they go to another. So that's my opinion of what a pose to pose animation is. In CGI, we call pose to pose animation something completely different, because there's something called tweening, or in between. Okay, so if we look at his puppets, and I've kind of pulled them up before, you can see here, this little guy here in the upper, let's see, open a new tab, there we go. This little guy here is from The Hand. It was the last stop motion film that Tronka did before he passed away. And it's really about a political type of situation, right? You'll notice that there's no foam latex, there's no silicone on these puppets at all, right? So you do not need to be like, oh, I need to have foam latex, I need to have silicone, I need to have all these really expensive materials that you can only find in North America or in rich countries in Europe or sometimes in Japan. You know, I'll be honest, foam latex is really hard to get in a lot of places. It's really expensive, and silicone is really expensive. Most stop motion puppets do not involve silicone or foam latex, all right? Just get it out of your head if you think that you must have that material. It's not necessary to mold or cast. I believe this head is made out of paper clay. Okay, so if you're interested in that kind of material. Tronka used a lot of raw material that he could find, because there was always this change in the government, and materials were always hard to get at that point. So he's not using any industrial ingredients here. The material, however, on the interior is basically wood, it's wood and brass that is cut to make ball and socket armatures, hinge joints, and that kind of stuff. And then the material on the outside is just basically clothing. Now, let me show you another really nice design, so you don't look at that ugly puppet and go, oh, it's ugly. Here we go. There's some really beautiful puppets that he had. Oops, this is better lit, I think. They're all bad images. Go here. So I'll open this one, and this is actually a feature-length film. It's the Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream, I believe, but it's a feature-length film. You can find it on the interwebs. It is on YouTube, I think. Anyway, so this does have molded and casted hands, I believe. They are a rubber of some sort. I'm not really sure, because I've never really physically seen these puppets, but I can tell you there's a seam line down the center right there, and then the hands are really detailed. So there's a lot going on here. These definitely were molded and cast. This versus the other puppet, of course, there's two different things going on right there, okay? Where these have clothing over top of the body, which is also partially, material interior, like foam or silicone. No silicone, sorry, it's foam. The exterior does have cloth, right? And then the heads, of course. Versus this one, which is basically a hard puppet, which is kind of like our block design that we talked about last time. Okay, fast forward, Kawamoto. All right, so the story goes, or the legend goes, and honestly, I'm only one of maybe 10 people in the world that actually know the legendary story of Kawamoto, and now you guys will know. So the other 10 people that are here will learn this story. Oops, I have to admit somebody here, hold on. Admit all. Okay, so the deal with Kawamoto is that Kawamoto let's put it to you this way. Kawamoto apprenticed under Yuri Tronka. Kawamoto is from Japan, and he basically learned, I don't remember specifically what production, I don't really know the full details. I was told this by a legendary stop motion animator in Japan who is friends with the armature designer of modern day, he's the modern day #1 armature designer in Japan, who we were having dinner with. And so she was telling the story, Magari is her name, and I can't remember the name of the armature maker, unfortunately, but they both are amazing individuals. And anyway, so the story goes, Kawamoto was apprenticing under Yuri Tronka. He left Czechoslovakia or Czech Republic, I can't remember which one it was at the time, left there with an armature. Tronka gifted him an armature, a ball and socket armature with brass. And then Kawamoto took this back to Japan, this armature, and then went and presented it to another person who was his friend who was a machinist, and said, make this, break this down, learn how to do this, and then do it. And that's how the birth of stop motion in Japan really happened, where they were making their own puppets using ball and socket armature technique, and they ended up producing these beautiful animations. Open image, a new tab, using traditional Japanese dolls. Okay, so you see here that it's just gorgeous Japanese dolls with gorgeous clothing. There's really nothing going on other than it's a ball and socket armature, which is technically a block design inside of a inside of a cloth out exterior. Okay. If you get the chance, watch a Kawamoto film. Look him up, Kawamoto, and just type in animator like I did, and you'll find his videos. I think the one that I would suggest is really crazy. Let's see. Yeah, Kichachiro Kawamoto. Yeah, if you can find his, there's one that has to do with a Buddhist monk and a dragon, and it's just amazing. But any of them are cool. Just watch any of those. Get a chance. Watch whatever you can. All right, so that's Kawamoto. Now we go to a whole new world, all right? I showed you Screen Novelties before. Dwarf Studios, Japan. Let's see if I can find the actual URL. There it is. Boom. All right, so these are my friends in Japan. I haven't talked to them in a long time, but I am friendly with them. Actually, we did something with them last year for the Stop Motion magazine. And if you look at the screen, you probably recognize a couple of these characters, especially if you have Netflix, because this little guy here in the middle has his own television show and Netflix. And then they're missing a character here. Where did he go? Well, anyway, this is, oh God, Komo Neko, which means little cat, Komo Neko. Anyway, this is Domo. We call him Domo-kun, but he's Domo. And then, of course, all the other characters that they have going on for them. Dwarf Studios builds things versus like Screen Novelties that uses a lot of materials. Like we're going to do a build very similar to Screen Novelties today. Dwarf does a build with texture also like Screen Novelties, but they do it in a way that is so refined that each individual puppet that they make is, I mean, not that everybody makes puppets and as works of art. Theirs are exceptionally well built. They'll last forever. I'll put it to you that way. Versus the old school Rankin Bass characters that are falling apart. And by the way, Rankin Bass was done in Japan, and many of the people associated with Dwarf Studios are associated with the original Rankin Bass production. So just FYI. In fact, anybody in stop motion in Japan has some kind of connection to someone that worked in Rankin Bass back in the day, like Rudolph and the Red-Nosed Reindeer. All right, and so here, let me find specifically what I wanted to show you. There we go, original works, there we go. Maybe we'll find it in here. Okay, it's a nice image, I can show you from this. Okay, images. So Domo, now we went from Tronca to Kawamoto, and now we're talking Domo. What is Domo? Well, Domo was a dinosaur. It's this brown character, this brownie-looking character, a piece of cake with a big mouth. Anyway, he is a block design that is the great-great-great-grandson of a Yuri Tronca puppet, because the guy that designed, or the guy that built the puppets for Kawamoto has built the armatures for Domo, all right? So we went from Tronca to Domo, right? There's a weird evolutionary thing going here, family tree. All right, the difference now, we're getting into the difference between this puppet and the original ones is that this puppet incorporates light materials. So in Czech Republic, they use wood for their bases, for their, and I'll show you a picture in a second. The wood is the base, their block, and then they add either wire or they add either ball and socket armature. Domo and all the other characters are actually brass with cork. So instead of using wood, they use brass, they braze it all together, and then they attach cork to all the pieces to lighten and give it bulk. And that's where we get our block design, like I showed you in the last class. And on top of that exterior of the puppet, or on top of the interior, sorry, is fabric or felt or foam or something that gives it the texture. So there's nothing being molded, there's nothing being cast, it's all built right there and there, right then and there in the studio where they make the animation. All right, so that kind of gives you an idea. Let me go one more time and let me see if I can find Ted Sidor. Ted Sidor animation. See if he shows up. Ted's a friend of mine. There's Ted right there. It's my buddy Ted. He was working at Artemin at this time. And I always show him in the magazine. Because I love his classic designs. He doesn't build puppets really anymore. He kind of plays with things. In fact, that was the cover of the magazine, for Stop Motion Magazine, for a minute. You can see here how beautiful that hand is. Just a gorgeous ball and socket armature hand. All right, and we go here. This demonstrates kind of what I was talking about. He has wood bulking up the area in the hips. And there was another image. And here we go. And so like thus the block design with the wood and the head. And then of course this character there. All right, so the evolution of the Dwarf Studios puppets is from this type of basic design. And the reason I'm showing you Ted's stuff is because Ted actually trained at the place where they build the armatures for the Tronca Studios. So Tronca still exists in a form, but it's a smaller studio. It's a little different. And anyway, they still do the traditional way of building things. They have a lot of different ways of actually attaching arms and hands and stuff to puppets. I'll point that out to you really quick. Maybe I could see this image. Open image in your tab. Boom. Oops. No, won't let me. I'm not going to download the image. I don't want to download that. Well, anyway, basically like adding a needle to the end of the hand, like the end of this hand here, and then you can insert like clay. It's pretty cool. All right. So that is Ted's stuff. We've gone literally from Tronca to Dwarf to Ted. Okay. What I'm going to talk to you today about is, let me close all these windows because we don't need any of this now. Kawamoto. There we go. What I'm going to talk to you today is, first we're going to cover materials, and then we're going to talk about the actual design and build of this puppet that we're going to do. So let me just find styrofoam. Styrofoam is a brand ball, but everywhere else they call it something a little different. Here in Mexico we call it Unicel. And you would want, instead of using cork, we are going to use styrofoam to bulk up our puppets. The reason I'm choosing styrofoam versus cork is extremely expensive. It's very difficult to get cork. It's actually from a tree. Cork is from a tree. Styrofoam is from a chemical production that expands. It basically makes cells of bubbles, burbujas interior. So styrofoam you can get anywhere in the world, pretty much. I'm pretty sure, because it's so cheap to make, and I haven't gone anywhere where I've never been able to get it. So maybe there are some places, of course. I'm sure some places in Peru, some places in Africa, some places in Asia, even in the United States, maybe you can't get styrofoam balls, that is. But they come in all sorts of different sizes and shapes. Now, why is this important in regards to our building of puppet? Well, and why am I teaching you? You could just go cut a piece of styrofoam and glue it back together. Well, guess what? It doesn't work that way. Styrofoam is one of those materials that it interacts with other materials really poorly. So what happens is, if you were to put a hot glue gun to styrofoam, it's going to melt. The hot glue is going to melt right through that piece of styrofoam. If you're going to use a certain type of chemical glue, like super glue, it's going to melt the styrofoam. You need to use a basic glue, craft glue in a sense, to glue the pieces together. All right. There's also a bunch of different techniques that we can use to carve styrofoam, so you don't have to be committed to just like one technique. And the other thing is, styrofoam is so versatile that you can actually get any form and any shape out of it, and it's super light. So we need to discuss that in regards to our design. And it comes in all sorts of different sizes. I like to get spheres because I can shape a sphere really nicely, but they do come in squares and all sorts of stuff. I actually collect styrofoam. I hate to tell you this, but when any shipment comes from anywhere in the world, there's always a ton of styrofoam in it. And I save that styrofoam because I can then use it for props and sets. And I don't have to buy styrofoam at that point, right? It's automatically there for me. Now let's talk about glues real quick because glues are an issue. So I'm gonna just go to Amazon, Amazon.com. Just do that one. All right, and I'm just gonna type in glue, all right? I'm gonna show you the hell you face. All right, so just typing in glue, we have a couple of selections automatically that we can kind of go to. The first is, of course, this white glue, this school glue. White glue is fine. It will, you can glue the two halves of the pieces together. In fact, I will probably use white glue when I glue the pieces together for the production. But I can tell you it takes a long time to cure. It takes like 24 hours to cure, and it's not always the strongest. And it can cause you some issues over time. So I actually made mountains. In fact, I'll show you a mountain. Hold on one second. Oh. So here's a little mountain prop that was produced. Oops, let me unshare that. Hold on. Stop sharing. Okay. So this is a little mountain prop that we used for the Gunna production. It was made using recycled foam. That was the shipping foam that we got from Amazon purchases anywhere in the world. And it has all the size, and it's glued with white glue. I'm actually trying to separate it right now, and it won't separate. So if anybody tells you you can't use white glue to make a puppet, they're full of it, because this is completely glued with white glue. All right. So don't think that you cannot use white glue. You can. The only problem is it takes a while to cure, to set. All right. So let me go back. Now the other one, and there we go. Gorilla Glue is ideally what you want. Okay. Gorilla Glue is not white glue. It's extremely strong formula. I'm not even sure what it is. But Gorilla Glue will work with literally all the materials that you want to use for making puppets. So don't write this off as, I don't need this. You should get some Gorilla Glue if you can. You can get a small bottle. They're not, I mean, it is expensive if you think about like the cost, like this is $9.94 US. To me, I think that's expensive for glue. But I'm going to show you the alternative, and you're going to lose your mind. All right, so Gorilla Glue, barge cement. All right, barge cement, well, actually it's really cheap here. If I buy this in Mexico, it's like, in Mexico, it's like $50 or $100, depending on the size. Barge cement is the industry standard for puppet making. So if you can get barge cement, I would suggest just having some just in case, just sitting it to the side somewhere. And they have different kinds. I'll tell you right now, the yellow one, the yellow and red is the most famous. It has a chemical in it that's toxic. So you want to be very aware and use this with a ventilated area. Barge cement is a rubber cement, extremely useful, right? And it holds a really nice bond. You can thin it, that's another one. And then, let me see, there's another one. Maybe they changed the cover of it, but there's another one. Let me just type in here. Go here, barge cement. We'll go to the company. They sell so many different kinds. Barge adhesives, there we go. So, and the reason I'm showing you this is because, there we go. This all-purpose, it has some kind of chemical in it that's just toxic. And then you end up with this other kind, this blue bottle. It is good, but it's not as good as, and that's the toluene, that's what it is. That's the toxic stuff, toluene. It's better for your health, but it doesn't adhere as well to the material. So that's something to be aware of. And then there's all these other versions, okay? All right, so barge cement. Last one for you. You ready for this? And you already know this one. JB Weld, JB Weld. Okay. There's lots of different JB Welds. JB Weld makes a putty. They make it clear. Oh, and I'm forgetting one other thing. Anyway, I'll get back to that in a second. They make a putty, they make a clear cast. It's pretty common around the world to find this stuff. The one that I'm pointing out to you is this this JB Weld twin tube is usually what I buy. If I get the Grande, the big one, I will destroy it before I even get through halfway through the tube. So I get the smaller ones because they dry out, whatever. But the JB Weld is the epoxy glue I've been using. You can use it on a lot of materials. You can use it, to my knowledge, on foam. So if you're using foam, you can actually use it. But what we need to do is we need to create blocks and then cover those blocks with the foam. And that's how we attach the foam to those blocks, is using something like JB Weld or Gorilla Glue or any of the other ones. All right. And then there's one last thing. Let me just do Gorilla Glue one. And it's GorillaTough.com. Yeah. There's one more glue I want to point out to you. And this is, let's see if I can find it here. So many materials they make. All this stuff going in the landfills. All right, so here it is. Gorilla Epoxy. All right. So when I first started learning how to make puppets, one of the materials that I used a lot, it's actually pretty difficult to get at the store, I have to order this online, is 5-minute epoxy. Most people look at me crazy when I'm like, yeah, I need a 5-minute epoxy. Like, well, there is no 5-minute epoxy. No, there is. Gorilla makes one. And it's clear. It's really, really handy to use for gluing the hands into those brass pieces or gluing puppets together rapidly. And if a puppet breaks and you need to be using it the same day, this 5-minute epoxy is actually a really good way of going. Total cure time is actually 16 hours, but once it sets in 5 minutes, you can start moving it and start working with it. So you can build puppets a lot faster. So I highly suggest you purchase some of this if you can get any of that. So this 5-minute epoxy. All right, so that covers that. And I have one more thing to say to you. Okay, let me just talk wood for a second. The reason that wood blocks, we'll see what shows up. Okay, wood comes in all various different sizes and shapes and forms, and also you can get a lot of different types of wood around the world. In Mexico, wood is a luxury. They build everything out of concrete here. So actually, when you get something made out of wood, it's usually, versus the United States. The United States has high quality wood. Mexico, if you want high quality wood, you're gonna pay a premium. A lot of the furniture is made with low quality pine wood. So it's a lot harder to get the wood here in Mexico for some reason. Maybe there's not enough wood farms. But in the United States, we have access to everything: birch, maple, ash, rare exotic woods like babinga, all sorts of different kinds of crazy types of wood that are available in the world. Oops, I think somebody's trying to get in here. I met Tina, there we go. And so what happens is when you want to make something, you're subject to the materials that you have availability to, right? One of the reasons why I 3D print is because I don't have access to wood the way I do anywhere else in the world. So I can just print my blocks and then I can attach my pieces to it. It makes it easier for me. But if you have access to wood, I highly suggest that you get some tools for cutting wood and carving wood and using the resources that you have. You can make really, really cheap puppets and charge lots of money using basic materials. So the primary main one is pine. I want to point that out to you. This is pine. These are pine blocks here by Alibaba. Alibaba's selling some pine blocks, right? You can buy, I could buy these in Home Depot. Basically, it's a piece of wood and you just cut it, right? But something like this, and I'm not sure specifically what kind of wood this is, but it looks to me like birch. Birch is a beautiful, magnificent, wonderful carving material. So if you want to get into carving wood for your puppets, birch is the one. Maple, yes, and birch are the two top ones. It's extremely expensive. And then there's another one, it's a hardwood, it's called ash, I believe. But birch and maple are the two that you probably will, when you start getting into carving wood puppets, if you get into doing that, those are the ones you really might like the most. Pine, however, is the most readily available. But if I show you that picture, where did that picture go? Let's see, that Alibaba here. We'll do AliExpress. It doesn't give me what I want. I want to show you the, let's see. There it is, boom. See these lines? Let me open this image in a new tab. See these lines in the wood? You will have a hell of a time trying to carve something with the rings in the wood. It causes a lot of issues because the dark spot could be soft, could be hard, and the light spot could be soft, could be hard, depending on what kind of wood you're getting. And when you're carving through there, you go soft, hard, soft, hard, soft, hard, and you'll start getting these weird ridges. So I point to pine as more of an interior kind of material to build with, and not versus the birch and the maple, which you can use as an exterior, like for heads and stuff. Okay, that's enough about wood. Let's get into carving some foam and designing our puppet here. Let me turn on my dragon frame. I think I have a couple questions, so turn that on real quick. Balsa wood is not a good material to be using for puppet making. You can use it for carving as an alternative to cork. Deborah, I don't know if you were here for the earlier part of the conversation, but telling everybody cork is what people use in Japan, the Japanese style, and then I suggest using foam, these foam pieces. Balsa is a beast. Actually, in Japan, they do use balsa wood also, but they glue it onto stuff. There's something interior also that makes it. I'm just not a fan of balsa wood, honestly. It's a very hard material to find properly. Okay, so trying to stop sharing here. There we go. Let me open my drag. Turn my camera on first. There we go. Quit. Open dragon frame. Dragon frame. Okay, and we're going to do puppets 1. Open. There we go. All right, let me pull back here. Oh, let me share my screen with you, see what I'm doing here. Share screen. There we go. All right. All right, so that's a fairly big puppet. Let me see. He's about that big. Yeah. And I got a bunch of pieces here. Let me show you some tools. Make sure I'm in focus here. There we go. And increase my size. There we go. Perfect. All right. So what I'm going to do here is cover my materials. All right, so some of the fun things that you can use for carving the foam are these files. It's very simple, all right? Files, sandpaper, where'd it go? X-Acto blade, hold on, I'll pull that out, there we go, my X-Acto blade. A little cover on there so I'll cut myself. I do have a handsaw somewhere in my studio. I don't know where I put it, but I have a handsaw that carves to cut wood. Let me, or not cut wood, to cut foam. Somewhere. And let me open my bag here. Get our materials out. Okay. Big old styrofoam ball. Another one. A bunch of little ones. One that's already cut there. All right. And this. That should be good for now. So we can start working. Oh, and of course you have to have your Popoxy 20 or epoxy, any kind, this type of stuff. And then I also want to point something out to you. This is like mattress foam. This gets used a lot in making puppets. So if you think that you want to do some build-up puppets, we're going to use this foam here, right? It's just it's important to realize that there's so many different materials. It's usually best to save as much as you possibly can. So for me, this came from my baby bath for my son. That's where I got this from. But this is in your mattress. This is in pillows. This is even in toys. You can buy this at the store. There's lots of different places you can get this type of foam from. In fact, the fabric store should have this. I forget the specific name of it, but we call it mattress foam, or carving foam is another one. And then, of course, this is Miso. And there's some more advanced materials, but I'm not going to get into those because the chances of you having access to those materials, unless you live in Hollywood, is nearly impossible. So I'm going to leave it at that. All right. I also want to point out I have my epoxy glue that I can use. I have my wire. I have some wood blocks. There's a wood block there. And on my printer here, I also have some other wood blocks. Let me grab these. Okay. These as well. Okay. So I actually have a bunch of different pieces I can deal with. So let's talk about what I'm going to do. All right. One thing to consider is the scale. So this is a really big puppet. The only time I would suggest you making a big puppet is if you have space to have big sets. If you don't have space to have big sets, then don't make big puppets. The other time that you make big puppets is if you want to have something that is more, you can animate it better. It's easier to animate a bigger puppet than it is a small puppet, right? There's actually a good scale. I want to say this guy's about a foot, yeah, he's about a foot tall. So 12 inches tall. He's a fairly big puppet with him squished, with his legs squished down, by the way. Fairly big puppet. The other cool thing about this type of style of puppet is that they're really simple to make. They're really fast to make. You can do them really, really fast. And you can get away with a lot. So if you mess up on something, you can always repair and fix it. By the way, the eyebrows on these puppets, they just stick on there automatically because it's felt. Oh, and that's what I meant to talk to you about. What we talked to you about next class is fabrics. Because next class we're going to do clothing. We're actually going to, I'll show you a clothing pattern and actually apply it and build it and all that other stuff for you. All right. So he's a fairly big size. So what we need to do is decide on the specific scale that we're going to work in. And I think I'm okay with that. Of course, these balls are gigantic. This actually is an egg shape that I got and I carved down. I know I saw, honestly. I don't know where that sucker went. Hold on. It's one of those things where I left the studio, I moved everything out, and now I moved everything back in. So I was trying to find that one saw that I have. Oh, I know where it's at. It's in the mold making room. Okay. So let me talk to you really quickly. This is an amazing cutting tool for foam like this type of foam. Okay. This, not so much. This has a lot of teeth. It's a handsaw, and this is another saw. Let me show you one more thing too, real quick. And this is all over the place here. Sorry about that. Stop. Your share. We're going to go to. Hold on. Let me open up that. Here we are. Okay. What happened? One second here. Foam carving. Foam carving tools. All right. There's something. You guys can see my screen right here with all the tools, right? I mean, yeah. Okay. She can see it. Perfect. Okay. There's a bunch of different types of foam carving tools. And typically foam carving tools are used for very large objects. In fact, if we look at this guy here, he's carving a really huge pieces of foam that are glued together. I'm not sure specifically what tool he's using there, but he's definitely carving them, and it's a very nice way of doing stuff. Okay, here's another example. So there's all these very large carving objects. People make all sorts of amazing things with foam at a large scale. On a smaller scale, we're dealing with something a little different. And the reason why they carve with foam is it's cheap for them, it's light material, and it breaks down over time. It actually doesn't last that long. So let's talk about carving materials for foam. For one, there are things such as, well, there's sculpting tools. You can always use a sculpting tool to carve foam. Not the most useful and actually a big pain in the butt, but it will work. There's hot gun glue thing. Basically, it's like a hot wire tool, and allows you to carve the material that way. There's a rasp, or I don't know, they're not calling that a rasp. What are they calling it? A foam shaving, curry comb carving, whatever. There's these type of tools. I never use them. I have seen people use them. And then let me see. Here we go. There's a hot penknife. This is actually really a useful tool, but in all honesty, I've destroyed a number of these. They don't last very long. You're probably better off using a soldering iron with a piece of metal sticking out of it, like a coat hanger piece. They can get really expensive. I mean, this one's $50, but I've destroyed these nonstop. I mean, I really don't know I shouldn't say I destroyed them. The studio I worked at destroyed them a lot because I would use it, it would be fine, and then somebody else would use it, and they go, it doesn't work. So I'd go back and try to use it, and I couldn't use it because it was broken. So they would break the tools, they just didn't know how to use them properly. Here you'll see there's a nice carving, what do you call that? It's a burning tool for wood. You can use those. Somebody's using an X-Acto blade. And then there's a more professional version of the hot knife. It's what it's called, as a hot knife. There we go. Foam cutting knives. And, oh, here we go. And this is a rasp. This is a very useful tool. It says shaver there, but I use that, actually used to use that a lot for making set pieces, for large set pieces. We use those. Okay, and let me see if there's anything else in here. I think that's pretty good. That should give you a nice array. Oh, and there's a how-to to make a foam ball cutting tool or whatever. I also would use things such as bandsaws and jigsaws. So I have a jigsaw right here. I used to use those as well for carving. All right, so let me stop that. Stop the share. Let me see what the questions there were. Hold on. Floral foam will degrade over time. So Deborah's asking about floral foam. It will definitely degrade over time. You don't want to be using floral foam. It's just, it's not a good material for that purpose, for puppet making. Okay. Okay, let me close my Safari. Let's get into this cutting of this material and designing our thing real quick. And then I can let you guys go. I don't want to keep you guys too long because, one, I need to lay down. My back is destroyed. I'm on a lot of aspirin and Tylenol right now. So, but let's get into the design phase of this. Okay, you should be seeing my dragon frame, I believe. Let me go back. Share. Dragon frame. Yep. Boom. Got it. All right. So we're in dragon frame. Oops. Come on, buddy. There we are. My hand. Perfect. All right. So what I want to do is I want to pick out my design. All right, and how I'm going to do it. For one, I need to section off the various pieces. How is his body going to go? Well, I can tell you he's actually not one whole piece. He's actually two pieces. He can bend forward, or bend back, and he can bend forward. So he actually has some kind of movement there. Ideally, what I would do is I would separate him maybe into a 3-section piece of wood in between, and then foam there. And then I could get more bend out of him. But no. All right, and then the head is a ball, of course, and I know that. The first thing I need to figure out is what are my I'm going to call them ley lines, but they're not really ley lines. They're lines of the design that I need to be focusing on. So if he's a human being, we usually draw a line straight down. I have reference on this ball. I'm going to go straight down. By the way, don't ever use marker on materials that you're not going to cover, because the marker, for instance, Sharpie and acrylic paint don't go well together because the Sharpie will always come through the acrylic paint. Okay, just a note you should take. All right, and then we're going to cross this way. All right, and that typically, that right there is, just my camera here. That typically is how we assign the face. The first is just to make a cross and find the center point, okay? Then the next stage we need to do is we kind of go a little bit above. It's usually halfway and then halfway down, okay? And what I've done is basically I've blocked out where his eyes probably are gonna go, okay? Typically what we would do is we'd actually add a jaw here. So if I were to come down, there'd be like a square this way, all right? And then that would allow us depth. We could actually add the jaw area. So I could actually put something here and whatever else. I'm not gonna do that. I'm actually gonna cheat and put the eyes a little higher, because eyes usually sit in the center of the area here. In fact, let me find a reference for you so I can explain it a little bit better. If anybody's ever drawn the human head, there we go. Find my zoom, share my screen. There we go. Okay, so if you see here, it's a good example. Open there's a new tab. There we go. So the first line that I was trying to draw is that around the sphere. And then the second line is straight down. And then what you do is you mark, the bottom one is where you mark the nose, and then the upper one is actually where you mark the brow. Okay? And then what we do is we draw a box down, and then we mark the center area from that, from the eyes to that. It should be the mouth. You can adjust it. It's adjustable. What I'm going to do, however, is not 100% like this. I'm actually going to stick the eyes above the eye line and give it more of a cartoony kind of look. All right. So that should help you figure that out when you're trying to do some kind of design work. All right. All right. So that's that. Let me draw where my eyes are going to go. I'm going to put them on here, about right there. About right there. All right. Very similar to this guy. His nose is going to sit in the center. Sit about right there. We'll see how I do with the nose. And then, of course, this area here is pretty much where the mouth is going to go. I now know that I want to carve, even though he has a round head here, I'm going to carve across this line here and across this line here. All right. And I do want this rounded shape. So I'm going to come down like that. All right. That's my first face for carving. All right. We're gonna cut that right now. In fact, let me do the body's pretty much straightforward. I'm not even gonna worry about that. So I could go into this material. By the way, if you are gonna start carving any kind of foam, you need to have a vacuum handy. Vacuums are just super, super important because this foam is magnetic. It will literally attract every single thing that you're wearing, all your clothes, everything. Just have a vacuum nearby. The other thing is, don't have fans blowing because you'll blow foam everywhere. Close your windows. It's kind of the opposite what you normally do, but close your windows so you're not blowing foam everywhere. Because a nice breeze will actually just carry foam through the whole house. If you're animating in the same room that you're making puppets, making foam puppets, here's the tragedy. If you're going to do this, make sure that you clean everything extremely thoroughly before you start animating. Like my table here gets used a lot for everything from building puppets to animating. So I have to clean the hell out of this table. I actually vacuum it and then I wipe it down and then I vacuum it again, just to make sure I don't have any foam on it. If I get foam on something, it's a disaster. I have plastic tables behind me. The foam and those plastic tables create a magnetic charge of static electricity and just drives me crazy. So the first thing is, this knife here is not ideal because the teeth are so jagged. But if I'm stuck in a situation and use it, I can just carve into it. But it eats a lot of material and it leaves me a lot of mess. This has smaller teeth on it, so I can actually carve a lot easier with it. I can get a nice cleaner cut and it's a lot faster. Go straight into the puppet here. Okay, so that's that. Let me go to the other side here. Okay. And ideally, a hot knife, or technically a hot wire, there's a hot wire system, is really fast. It just runs right through there and have zero mess with all this foam. And fun story while I'm doing this, when I was at Disney, we had, they basically said, John, make us a foam room. So they gave me a little conference area that didn't have a window or wall or anything. I mean, it had walls, but didn't have a door. So I had to get the curtain, close the curtain. And then we bought these huge sheets of foam, and I'm in there carving foam. And by the time I was done carving all the foam, there was a mountain of foam in this room. The whole room, you couldn't even walk in the room. There was just foam everywhere. And we broke 2 vacuum cleaners cleaning the hell out of that place. All right. So the next, we have to deal with the jaw. And I think I'm going to take a little bit off the back of the head. So we've already carved a piece of that. We're going to go into a little bit more depth here. Let me see. I like to bring this down a little bit. I mean, I like the roundness, but I'm going to kind of carve into this way, I think. In fact, maybe not even that. I'm going to go here because this will be the face there. And then I can cut deeper into this for a jaw. So let's do that. Cut into that way. And get my rounded brow a little bit. And then I like this curvature, but I'm going to cut a little bit of it off. And we're going to go down here, I think, and cut all this out. Okay. So that should get me to a point where I can do some fun stuff. All right. So let's do this. Oh, and I need to mark my sideline because if I forget where that is, it'll do that for the eyes reference. All right. So now, don't cut those lines, by the way. This one, I'm going to go down this way in the face. Keep going. By the way, it's actually easier to do this in your lap. Get a better hold of it, or if you have a vise attached to this to the table, then you can just kind of saw across. Carve a little bit of that off. All right, now I can carve this area here and then around. Okay, I'm actually going to go this way. See all the mess I'm making here, so I'm very, very, very happy. All right, so I got my basic form here, and then I can just carve from this. I can just build from this. Oops, sorry, you can't even see what's going on here. Sorry about that. So I carved out the pieces. Turn the light down so you get a little better view. There's this one. Yeah, there we go. There we go. So you can see here I've carved my pieces. Now what I can do is I can take some very, very strong sandpaper here. It's a heavy grit sandpaper, something like a 60 or an 80. So if you're taking notes, look at between a 60 and an 80 grit for sandpaper. And then what I can do is I can go in here and I can just sand and get down to the form that I want. See, I got a nice round edge there. Right. Keep going the whole way around. Try to do this fast for you. 12. Let me. Pop it out of it. There we go. All right. All right. So that is there. All right. Give me 1 second. I'll be all set. And you might go, if we're going to cover this, why are you sanding this? Well, you have to have enough surface area to be able to glue things down. So if the surface area is wrong, it's just not going to work properly. By the way, I got to cut a little bit off here. This is wrong. There we go. Might be a little bit too much, but it's okay. All right. And I can just keep carving and carving and carving until I get exactly what I want. All right. And that's good for now. That's good enough for rock and roll. So we've shaved this down. We have kind of a form going. Now I need to consider this mouth shape. What am I going to do here for the mouth, right? I've already got my head. I know that the mouth is going to go down here. Yeah, that's the spot. So what do I do? Well, for one, I can carve this way and carve out, or and have replacement mouths that way. And I can use something like one of these pieces. Let me see, where's that half piece? Here we go. Do something like this, stick it in there, have it do this type of thing. It's very similar to almost everywhere. Very similar to this, where the mouth comes off and attaches back on. Ideally, though, what you want to do is you want to have pins in here so you can stick like needles. What I'll probably do is I might take another piece of foam, maybe a piece like that, and have replacement mouths that are almost like a sticker. You know what I mean? Anyway, now let's deal with the body. So that's that. Now I need to deal with the body. Where's my Sharpie? It's right here. So the body, I can make them super, super fat. I'm not going to do that. Just find the middle line, which is right there. They give it to you automatically. My middle line. Let's cross my half there. And then I'm going to find the side. Go. Really, I'm doing this by line of sight. So if you're really wondering how I can see all this, I'm just doing it by eye. If you really want to get physical and measure everything, you can definitely do that, but it's not super important if you're just building this for yourself. Okay. All right, so let me carve that real quick, carve that piece up there. Get it as straight as you possibly can, honestly. Oops. Oh, it's dragging for. I gotta set the timer off this differently. There we go. All right, so that is what I want kind of for a body, but that being said, I want to get an angle this way. So an angle more this way, and then I want to pelvis comes down like that, so give me chest and then cut off the back a little bit, and then round that. So let me draw that for you. What I'm talking about is going like to here, and then more of a drop down like that. And then I'm going to carve kind of, actually, I kind of want to round it a little bit like that. All right. I might actually cut them a little bit more. Let's see. Yeah, I cut them a little bit more. Cut it down here. There we go. I think that'll work. All right. So first, I'm going to cut this line here. All right. Next, I'm gonna cut a little bit outside of that and then sand it down to that shape. All right, this one here. All right, so there I have a body, or a body blank. Sandpaper. Okay, now I have my body blank and I have my head forms, right? So I can actually go ahead and start forming these properly to get the kind of look that I want. For me, I like a more rounded body, so I'm gonna just take some basic sandpaper, sand out those edges that I currently have. Get that form going. Once again, a vacuum is super important. So I'm making a ton of mess. Right. So that form would work for me. If I had, in all honesty, if I had my electric sander here, I would actually do, and I was doing this really fast, I would stick this on the electric sander and just go shoot and have my form instantaneously with one swipe or two swipes, depending on how fast I'm running it. But without that, it's actually pretty useful just to use sandpaper. Power tools, though, however, make this job a lot easier. That's actually, yeah, his jaw is pretty wide there. Yeah, so I like that form. I do want to sand this down a little bit more here. And you got to get your form first before you go to the next stage. And I'm going to show you the next stage in a second. Super important, however, because if you don't cover the form first, I mean, if you don't carve and shape your form first, you can't build a puppet. It'll just be a disaster. So basically, we're sculpting this form that we want right now. Okay. I'll round it out a little bit more. That's pretty close. There. I want to have some cheekbones of some sort. You know? His eyes are going to go here. His nose. Again with this dragon frame. Sorry, it's not notifying me. Close. Okay, so his eyes would go here. His nose will go here. And then he's got some cheekbones in his mouth. It's really what I'm dealing with here. All right? All right, so maybe round that back end a little bit. Okay, but anyway, this is for you. This is not just for me. Because I could spend hours sitting here, breaking out the files, playing with this thing. I'm not going to do that. What we're going to do now is we're going to decide on the armature. Okay, we have, and I need to clean this mess off. Really, is what I need to do before I get into gluing. But we're still going to have to cut some more. So. Okay, so to deal with the armature that goes inside of this block design, you need to have pieces of wood of some sort, some kind of shape or size that can fit inside, okay? So ideally, all we're gonna do is cut this open, make a cavity where this wood will go, and then what we do is we glue only half of that in. We make sure that they're drilled, by the way. So glue only half of that in, and then build our armature from that, and then do the other part, and then build from there. So we literally have to cut the interior out and stick these bad boys in there. Because of what I'm making here, I can go a number of different directions. I can cut this piece in half here, and then I can have that bendable waist here. I can actually extend the waist and just have the chest area and the lower area. I don't think I'm going to do that. I'm going to leave him as just a straight body. And then get away, I'm going to cheat a little bit. And then the other thing too is I may not have to use blocks of wood. Ideally, blocks of wood are better, but I can also use Propoxy and make my armature that we saw before, where it had the wire that went through and the Propoxy in the hands, and then we can all put everything together. Another thing is the hands can be built off of the wire. So I can do a 2-wire technique, and I can build all that into the armature that I'm going to make. All right, so for now, let's talk about this. Let's actually do this. I'm going to cut a line straight down through the body, okay? And then through the side of the head is another one. So I want to go down. We also want to make sure that we find the center point for where the neck comes out, because that's where we want to make sure where the wire comes out. All right, so now I need to carve those. Make more of a mess here. All right, so those are the 2 halves there, and then we'll do the head. I'll start from here. Other side was more bulk. So in the head cavity, I need to hollow out an area. And in the body area, I need to hollow out an area. You also need to make sure that you kind of mark where they're going. Figure that out. You got to draw your lines across in a parallel kind of situation. We don't need to sand the interior. You can if you want, it's not necessary. Ideally, what we do is we just kind of cross another one. And I'm not sure exactly where I want to stick that, but what this does is it allows me to see that the pieces meet up. You know, this way, and then I can decide on where I want to put that head. Not head, sorry, where I would put the armature. All right. Now let's get carving here. I want to use, I think what I would do is I would use one of these pieces of wood here. All right. And then for the body, I'd use this piece of wood here. But you see the dilemma in this. I need to have this up here a little bit more, you know, so that way it fits into the cavity properly. And then I could actually put another piece of wood down here if I wanted to for the legs. Or I could just get a bigger piece of wood, you know, and fill this whole interior with wood. So I have my form on the outside, but my block design is on the inside. Block design's on the inside. Unfortunately, I don't have a bigger piece of wood. Otherwise, I would probably go with a bigger piece. But I can still use my epoxy. All right, using an X-Acto blade, let's carve out the head nodule. Go in here like this. In fact, what I probably need to do with this, I didn't do it. Should mark this length. Let's just kind of mark the size that we want. This will fit in here. Sideways, at an angle. You should be able to pop that out. Got it right. Well, that out. And I can kind of pick at this and pull all the little foam out that I possibly can. Okay, so that should be 1/2, right? That's 1/2. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to carve the other half, right? Really quickly. Let me just put that there. Right, there we are. Pop that out. You see why foam is really useful, because it's just a super fast material to get into, just to get your forms made. So, you know, I think somebody was maybe it was Jeremy, I can't remember who it was, but was asking me about how you can do a production in a week. And this is actually how you can do a production in a week, is to have materials that are very useful and very readily available and cheap enough for you to be able to get to pay out of your pocket if you need to. The only problem is, does the design dictate the production? Okay, so there we go. So now I can stick that piece of wood, that block design inside that, and we now have a nice way of attaching armature, right? Without going into too crazy of detail, I'm just going to put this in here real quick, cut down to here, and then we're going to talk about gluing it together and dealing with our armatures. We've already covered block design, so you should know how to make a block design armature. I shouldn't have to show you a block design here, just to save us on time. And then, but you should know from either the module or from our last lecture. And then from here, we can actually go and apply fabric and all that other stuff on top of the character. For now, though, however, I'll stop here. We'll stop here, and we can actually do some questions, and we can end at 12:30, leave a little earlier than normal. I want to be able to lay down and take care of my back. If you guys came in late, I injured my back over the weekend. So anyway, so that gets you into that form. Next class, and by the way, it's put there. Next class, we're going to talk about clothing and also applying fabric to the characters. I should have a whole bunch of different types of glues, and we should actually have a couple completed builds that I'll go through with you. Let me see here. Let me stop the share there. All right, switch my camera to there. Okay. What vacuum do I recommend? A shop vacuum, cheap one. Derek was asking. I have, in fact, I'll show you what I'm using. This little guy, okay? Just for my puppets, all right? I can actually use that shop vac for what's called vacuum forming. It's a more advanced technique, but I could definitely use that for vacuum forming and making some really cool shapes. So from this form here, we need to glue these pieces together once our block design armature is built. Okay, so I've carved the foam, I've sanded it, and I've gotten it prepped for putting the armature in. You're going to have to cut a channel, of course, where the wire comes down, but you build your block design from that. Okay, and then the pieces get glued in to the first half the whole way down. Okay, so we would literally glue all of that in right there. Okay, and once that's glued in with our armature, then we attach the other half. Okay, if you mess up, it's not a big deal. It's foam. All right, it didn't cost you a lot of money. This cost literally 20 pesos, which is technically $1. All right, so it's really affordable and cheap to make. And then from there, you let that sit overnight, probably for 24 hours. The type of glue that you would use, I would suggest use Gorilla Glue. That's probably the best you're going to find for foam is Gorilla Glue. You can use white glue, which is basically, you call it paper glue. You can use that, Elmer's paper glue. I would not suggest using rubber cement because rubber cement won't hold the bond very well. And then the other version of the glues that you could possibly use, you can use the Propoxy, or not the Propoxy, the epoxy JB Weld, you can use that. But I would be really leery of attaching any kind of chemically solvent glue to a foam because you'll probably have a bad reaction. It will probably, while it's in liquid form, it'll probably melt. I've done it and it's worked, but I question that because sometimes the materials don't work. It's weird. It's just, sometimes they work and sometimes they don't when you get into using epoxies. Epoxies really hate certain materials hate epoxies. So I would go with Gorilla Glue if you can, or white glue. All right, so let's open some questions here real quick. You can type them in if you want. Let me put my headphones on, stop the recording. Let's see, stop recording.